Hey everybody, how's it going? It is Bill, and this is Sunday night, April 15th, tax day, and it is a randomly blizzardy day here in Wisconsin because apparently spring no longer exists in this area. So I ended up with a weird night off that I didn't expect, so I figured that I would test drive an idea that I've been kicking around. I've been thinking about doing more stuff on the channel. And I did a preview video for Good Dog, Bad Zombie a couple of weeks ago and had good feedback on it. I didn't get a lot of viewers, but the people that I had seemed to really enjoy it. And so I tweeted something about this earlier today, kind of rejiggered my game room a little bit to make it so that way I can do a little bit more live streaming of stuff like that. And so this is kind of a test, so bear with me, folks, if this is the first time that you're watching the channel. This is going to be a little bit rougher than the main show is, The Cubist, which is Monday nights, 9 p.m. Central Daylight Savings Time. But we're going to test drive this, and we're going to see how this goes. So constructive criticism is always welcome. Tonight, we are going to start this is a show concept that I've had for a while called Under the Radar. I think there are a lot of really great older games that maybe have been sort of forgotten about as time has gone on. These are not games that I would call classics necessarily, but they're games that I think are better than they would seem at first blush, especially if you see how cheap they are. So these are games that I think maybe don't get the kind of love that I think maybe they deserve. So, by the way, hi, people that are viewing. I see that I've got a couple live viewers, which is awesome. That's cool. The chat room is open, so if you, I am watching it, I have it open here on the laptop. So if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in chat. But in the meanwhile, let's get straight into it, and let's talk about, hang on a second here, present to everyone. Let's talk about Abandoned Ship. This was designed by Dr. Reiner Knizia, published in 2008 by AEG. And this is a really cute filler game. The idea behind it is that each player is going to have, hey, how's it going, you two? Each player is going to be rooting for 3 of these 7 rats. And the rats are trying to escape a sinking ship and get up to the upper deck. The ship is sinking, and one of the great conceits of this game actually has like 2 or 3 really cool things going for it. And by the way, if you're wondering why it's all the way up here and I've got this dead space down here, you'll see in just a hot second how this all works. But anyway, the idea is that you are rooting for 3 of these 7 rainbow-colored rats here. And then you know which 3 you're rooting for because at the beginning of the game, you are dealt one of these tiles. Get right up close and see if it focuses. There we go. So in this particular case, you're rooting for black, green, and yellow. And these 7 tiles are randomly distributed to whatever player. It plays 3 to 7 players, by the way. I should point, yes, game about Congress. Yeah, you're not wrong, especially in 2018. But anyway, everybody is dealt 3 to 7 players. Everybody's dealt one of those allegiance lifesaver tokens. And then that tells you who you are secretly rooting for, and nobody knows, only you do. And then whoever is going to start the game starts, and they take all of the dice. So there are 8 dice in the game. There are 7 dice that correspond to the 7 different colors of rats. I hope you can see them there. And then there's a white die. And every die, well, not every die. I'll come back to this in a minute. All the dice are unique, okay? So I'm going to start by showing you the yellow die as an example because it's got nice contrast and it's easy to pick up on the screen. The dice have, and the idea is when it's your turn, you're going to roll all of the dice and then choose one of those dice that you want to use, okay? And whichever die you choose, you're going to do whatever the die says. Most of the time, the die is just going to show a number. So like this purple die came up as a 1. And if that's the case, you take the corresponding colored rat and you move it up that many spaces on the boat. So in this case, if I decided to use that, I would move the purple rat up 1 space. Then that die is removed from the pool and the next player rolls the remaining dice. Now, let's say they decide to enact this orange die with a 4 with a circle around it, okay? So normally that die would mean move the orange rat 4 spaces. However, the circle makes that die wild. That the circle means that any mouse can be moved with that die. So instead of moving the orange rat, you could use this to move, let's say, the green rat 4 spaces. So you'd go up to here. And then again, the die is still removed. So now not only have you moved a rat that maybe you care about, okay, but you've also screwed over the orange rat who is maybe not one that you're rooting for. And then the next player would roll the dice. And you'll notice there's this eighth wild die. The wild die is always, all 6 sides have circles on it. So you can use this on any rat whenever you want to, okay? But let's say I rolled this 11 with an X next to it. Whenever you roll a die with an X, you use it just like you normally would, but the die is not removed. Instead, it's put back into the pool and handed to the next player. So now that die can be used again. So that 11, let's say I use that and move the red rat up 11 spaces from the 10 to the 21. All right. A side note, see this little token that was here? That is a bonus point. And the first player that moves a rat onto that space gets to keep that token for the remainder of the game. So that's just a little bit of bonus points. We'll come back to how points work in a second, okay? You can also use a die that has an anchor on it. If you use an anchor on a die, and sorry, I'm not good at aiming things at the camera yet, but I'm working on it. If you use a die with an anchor on it like that, then you take whatever rat you are moving and you move him back to the next closest rat behind him. So if I use the anchor, let's say the board looked more like this after a number of die rolls, okay? If I use the anchor on the red rat, he would come back to where the green rat was, okay? So back to wherever the next person behind that rat is, all right? And then the last thing that appears is an arrow, and the arrow is the exact same, well, the exact opposite, I'm sorry, as the anchor. So rat forward. So for instance, orange could go forward to where or something like that, okay? So you rinse and repeat, and you keep doing this around and around and around, and every time it's your turn, you're gonna roll whatever dice are left, use one of them, so red anchor as an example, and pull it back here, and then that die will probably be removed. As soon as the dice get down to where you're only passing one die to the next player, so all of these other dice have been removed, okay? There's only one die that would be handed to the next player. The turn, or that round of the game ends, okay? As soon as the round ends, you do something weird. And this is the gimmick and the conceit game. And I think the thing that really makes the game super clever, okay? So I'm gonna just scatter a couple things around here, all right? Just to kind of make it a little more interesting. Let's say that the board looks like this when all is said and done, okay? So the poor black rat, nobody bothered to do anything with the black rat. As soon as that happens and we only pass one die, we'll reveal one of these tokens. And see that shows a number 6. The boat sinks that many spaces. So in this case, the boat would sink 6 spaces. And here's the cool gimmick part. See this little tab? You pull this and you literally go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so you cover up, you slide the whole board down and it covers up the first 6 spaces of the board. And then you start another round. So you roll the dice and you do the same thing over and over again. But again, as soon as all dice but one have been eliminated from the pack, you'll reveal another one. And then you would move 7 more spaces. 1, 2, 3, and see how the black rat now would get swallowed up. So the black rat ends up being removed from play. So you take the black rat out, you take the black die out. Anytime a rat leaves play, its corresponding die also leaves play. So now the game speeds up a little bit because now there are fewer rats to move, fewer dice to roll every turn. And eventually, somebody is going to get a rat up to the top deck. And that's where these 4 spaces come in. So I'm just going to slide this down, all right, so that way you can see sort of how this works. All right, and I'm just mainly trying to focus for the camera, so bear with me here. Everything good? All right, so you see these 4 spaces up here. The first one here shows an X. The first rat that gets up to the deck gets trampled by the passengers that are trying to get off of the sinking ship, and that rat dies. And again, its die is removed from the pack, okay? Now, the second rat that gets up to the top is the first one to escape and gets 5 points at the end of the game. The third rat to get up to the top will get 3 victory points. The fourth rat will get 2 victory points, and that triggers the end of the game. So as soon as the fourth rat escapes the ship, then the game ends instantly. Okay. And you score up points. Everybody reveals their little lifesavers with whatever colors they had. So in this particular case, this player was rooting for green, was the only color that got off the ship. So this player would get a whopping 2 points. Very exciting. This player was rooting for green and orange and purple. Green got 2 points. Purple got 3. It's 5. Orange got nothing. So best laid plans of mice and men. Ha, ha, ha. This player ends up getting 5 points. And don't forget, anybody that moved a mouse onto one of these cheese tokens got these bonus points as well. So you're picking up here that there's only 10 points available on the top of the ship, which means these cheese tokens are either 1 or 2. A couple of them are 2 victory points each. So these are a big deal. So sometimes you're going to move a rat up on the ship, even if you don't particularly care about that rat, because if you can score 1 or 2 victory points straight out the gate from it, you're going to, be off to a huge start. Matt, yeah, it does feel a little bit like downforce. I don't disagree. And the thing to remember is that downforce, here, I'm going to switch to the me camera now because you've already seen all that stuff. And I'll go back to the dice in a minute. The thing about downforce is that it's been around for a long time. That mechanic has been around. There was I think Milton Bradley did Daytona 500. Mayfair did Detroit Cleveland Grand Prix. There was a German game called Top Race. That mechanic has been done a lot over the years. And so this game, which is 10 years old, it bears pointing out, this was published in 2008. This game sort of does the same kind of thing, but in a much faster feel, which I think is one of the really interesting things about it, is that this game is really quick. Like even with a 7-player table, this is maybe a half an hour game. So this is a definite filler, but it's got table appeal, right? Because it's got this ridiculous sinking ship thing. Here, I'll go back to the board so you can see it. This sliding board dealio, which physically has the ship actively sinking, while it's a little bit of a table hog, you're probably going to want to play this with a larger group anyway. So you're going to end up being at a slightly larger table as it is. And these tiles, here, I'll reveal all of them. Some of them are as low as 3s. There's an 8. So what is it? There's a 3, a 4, 2 5s, 2 6s, a 7, and an 8, which if you're familiar with Reiner Knizia's design strategy of, he's all about math. Like he's his games have often been, I think, somewhat, oh, is it still showing me? Okay, cool. Sorry. Thank you. There we go. Let's try that. Thanks, Eric. So this is what I was showing up here, the sliding board. And then here are the tiles that cause the ship to sink. So there are definitely, by the way, the math comes up that the ship will absolutely sink. 15, 25, 37, 41, 44. Yeah, there's only 36 spaces on the ship, and there's like 47 of these tiles. So the ship will definitely sink before the end of the game, unless you run out of dice. Like unless a bunch of rats die. The other way, by the way, that the game can end, 2 rats left on the board at all. Those 2 rats automatically move up to the 2 highest scoring places. So if no rats have gotten off the ship yet, the last 2 rats, which is super unlikely, by the way, the way that the math works in this game, the odds of it actually of nobody getting off the ship before 5 rats die is very, very low, or unless everybody's just playing to troll each other, which I suppose is definitely possible. So, all right. The other thing that I wanted to show you, by the way, is that not all dice are created equal in this game, which I think is really cool. This is another thing that is very easy to overlook, but every one of these 8 dice is unique. So for instance, the purple die here, I'll show you, has a 1, a 2, a 4, a 3 wild, a 6, and an anchor. Okay. So it's got a fairly even spread, right? But it has a 6, but also a 1. So he's a little bit streaky. The orange rat has a 1, a 2, a 3 that stays in. You'll, by the way, the 4 is what stays in for the purple rat. The 3 is the one that stays in the mix for here. The 4 is wild. A 5, no 6, but also no anchor and no catch-up. So this is the slow and steady wins the race rat. Yellow is a 1, an anchor, a 2 wild, a 3, a 5 that stays in, and another 3. So prone to bursts of speed. And really, every rat, after you play this game a couple of times, the rats really start to feel different. So there's a 2 that's reusable, a 2 that's wild, another 2 that's reusable. So this die doesn't get gotten rid of very easily. A 3, a 6, and then an anchor. So every one of these dice does something different. And you actually, as you play the game more and more, start to realize that each of the rats really does kind of work a little different. Yeah, and Matt, you're not wrong. You definitely don't need to know the odds to enjoy this game. And I think that there is an entire segment that isn't going to care, right? Like, this is just a silly game about rolling a bunch of dice and moving your rats around and collecting these ridiculous cheese things and watching the ship sink. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like, I like games that can be, I don't tend to gravitate towards lighter games. You guys, if you paid attention at all to the Cubist over the last couple of years, you probably know that the vast majority of the games that I play tend to trend heavier. But in this particular case, the light games that I like are games that you can think about more if you want to, but you don't have to. Games where, now I'm curious, is this me now? This is me. And this is the game. Okay, cool. Sorry, remember, this is a test of the live streaming too, so bear with me. I like lighter games where you can choose to think about it a little more if you want. Now, I don't particularly like it when that game can cause people to OP like crazy and ruin the game for people that do want a lighter play experience. But I think that, you know, you can, like, one of the things that makes this game interesting to me and why and I'll tell you the story really fast about why I was thinking about this game in a minute here. One of the things that has always appealed to me about this game is that because there is that extra level for me personally to think about while I'm playing, I don't get bored with it. Like some filler games, if you don't have that extra layer, it's very easy, at least for me, to get kind of bored and be like, yeah, I don't really care if I ever play this again, right? Like, it's fine. There was nothing wrong with it. And maybe it's even an actively good game that I really enjoy, but it's a thing that, you know, the challenge wears off for me and I don't just enjoy the act of going through the motions. And I know I got the quote too, Matt, but I think that it's a valid point, though. Games that have statistical irregularities or not irregularities, asymmetrical statistics. So games where you can play the game, you know, more or less or whatever at your leisure. It's really a matter of taste on whether you want to know those things or not. So whatever, I don't care. Okay, so pros and cons of Abandoned Ship. Pro, it's got cool table presence. As soon as people see the ship sinking and the colorful rats, I mean, the neat thing about this is that you have these big, chunky wooden rats to give you an idea on how big they are. Okay, so they're nice and big, you know, rainbow colored rats, which is fun. So they're very pretty. Okay, so this looks like crap. That doesn't surprise me. This is, sorry, sidetrack because this is a test. So I appreciate the input, Eric. This is my built-in camera on an old MacBook that I was able to repurpose for doing these live streams. The camera up that you're seeing the game through is my iPhone 7 Plus, which has a really killer camera. And this one is at least 7-year-old MacBook. So it's just straight up a camera quality issue, I'm sure. This camera kind of blows by comparison. But I also, at the moment, don't have another option. I'm working on that. If you go to Pod Pledge and you feel like contributing monetarily, it'll help pay for cameras. Just throwing that out there. So who knows? I don't know. All right. So anyway, pluses. It's got good table presence. The sliding board is pretty rad. The rats are cool. The dice are interesting because they're all different. And there is that whole manipulation of dice aren't necessarily just used to move the rat you want. You might use a wild side on a die to move a different rat and then eliminate that die. As a matter of fact, that's a pretty common tactic in the game. So that way you are getting rid of that die, therefore preventing a rat you know you don't care about from moving anymore. So, so that's really cool. Let's see. The hidden which rats you're rooting for thing. There are 7 colors of rats and 7 allegiance lifesaver dealios. So I guess I'm not smart enough, quite frankly, to know the distribution. I'm sure I could if I really dug into it a whole bunch, but I have no real idea on how I would do that, as like I'm not good at that sort of statistical analysis. So I'm positive they're evenly spread, right? Like I'm sure that everything looks, great. Like everything works out statistically across the 7 lifesavers. It has to. I can't imagine why it wouldn't. Reiner, Dr. Knizia is always very, very careful about his math in his games. That's the one thing you're never going to be able to fault him on is faulty math, because that's sort of his deal. The other really upside to Abandoned Ship, I think, is that it's very cheap. So this is and thank you, Matt. I got that. I appreciate that. It might just be a bandwidth issue too. I don't know. The thing about when you watch The Cubist, that is filmed on my main computer, which is hardwired into my router. This is being filmed over Wi-Fi in my game room. So there is going to be a little bit of slowdown, right? And again, because this is a older MacBook, I'm sure that has something to do with it as well. Anyway, this is a cheap game. That's the other thing about this. In 2008, I want to say that this was the era of like Tanga being a really big deal, because it felt like a lot of board game publishers really got their print runs wrong and like printed really big runs of games on a gamble because the game was good, but then it ended up not selling well. And so Abandoned Ship, I feel like, was one of those games where it was never particularly expensive after its initial release because it didn't do well, and it ended up being on the super discount racks of basically every place. I got my copy for free because my dad was cleaning out his, well, okay, here's the story. I promised a story before. I owned this game like 6, 7, 8 years ago and then loaned it to somebody, and I don't know who. And I loaned the game out because they were going to a family thing, and I said, Abandoned Ship is a great family game. You can teach this to anybody, and in 3 minutes you're up and playing, right? Like there's 5 rules. Roll the dice, X's go back in, everything else doesn't. Anchors move you back, move you forward. Get the cheese, first rat dies. Good job. You're ready to rock and roll. That's basically the whole game, right? So you can literally teach this to anyone. And loaned it out, and I knew who I loaned it to, and I never got it back, and I was always really sad. And then my dad asked me to come over and help him clean out his basement, and he was going to put a bunch of games in the silent auction for the Gaming Hoopla coming up in a couple weeks, and he had this game. He's like, I don't know what to do with this, and I said, you need to give it to me. Because I am missing my copy, and it was still in the shrink. And he's like, yeah, sure, go ahead. So I was excited. I came home with it. I redeemed myself, and I got my copy of Abandoned Ship back, which is awesome. So I really like this game. For some reason, Amazon showed a copy of this on sale for $70, which is bananas, because you definitely don't need to pay $70 for this. If you go on BGG Marketplace, somebody sold a copy recently for like $40, but every other sale before that was like $5 to $10. So I'm pretty sure that with a little bit of judicious like this for not real expensive, and there is like, it's totally worth it. On the Cubist scale, I guess I would, assuming that the price is what I think it is, which is still pretty cheap. This is a 100% buy it. This is that great mix of, it's fillery enough that you can teach it in minutes, but it's fun. People are going to want to play it a second time, most likely. It doesn't tend to outstay its welcome unless you get somebody that is prone to analysis paralysis, and you'll know about that person right away. And you just tell them, just pick a die, man. Just do a thing. It's not pretty hard. It's not real hard to figure out what to do on your turn. So it flows pretty fast. Like I said, it's real pretty. It just really does a fantastic job. The sliding board here is just this super cool. And this comes apart, by the way, when you put this here. I'll show you what it looks like when you don't have it together. This is its own, this is its own folding dealio. And then this folds separately, and it all fits real easily. You can put it back together in a whopping minute. And then you've got yourself a good game. So I really like it. It's a buy it for me. There's probably going to be an unofficial 5th rating. I've been thinking about this for a while, which is a trade for it. Trade for it's are games that are maybe a little bit too expensive to actually spend money on it, but are definitely worth adding to your collection. This might be a trade for it if you can't find it cheap. I would not spend a ton of money on it, even with the cool table presence, because I don't think it's worth spending. You know, it's not the kind of game that you're going to be like, it's abandoned ship night, everybody. Yay. You know, it's not that. But this is one of those great games that you're definitely going to want to pack for a family thing, or take with you to a game night. So that way you have a nice light game that you can, play for a half an hour that people aren't going to be too bored playing something, or when you have a half an hour at the end of your game night before, everybody's main game is wrapped up and you just want to, everybody's not quite done yet. I recommend it. Chat room, I'll stall for another minute if anybody has any questions about it or whatever. Again, Reiner Knizia's Abandoned Ship 2008 release from AEG. It's a buy it / trade for it from me. So I think it's an awesome game. I also want some feedback from everybody, whether you're watching this now live. Thank you, live viewers. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate the constructive criticism on the feedback on the live streaming. I think that I like this setup. I got a new table. This you're looking at here is a new one. It is an 8-foot banquet table, one of those super sturdy ones that's basically made out of like steel and hatred. And, it's just this big, gigantic, bulky thing. But luckily, my game room has enough room for it now, which is awesome. So I really wanted to get a slightly bigger table. And then I've had this playmat for a while, but I was able to bust out the other half of it. So it covers like 6 out of the 8 feet of this table, which means that I basically have a huge space where I can do bigger games in the future. So I'm really excited to be able to play bigger stuff. And then this other 2 feet over here, as you were looking at it, that way, there we go. This way back here is where the computer and everything is. So this will work out pretty good. Yeah, I like the setup. This is good. And I can finally get in front of my shelfie again. I haven't been able to be in front of my shelfie for a show in forever. So this new setup, I think, will work pretty well for this. So anyway, yeah, this is a really good, Matt. That's a really good choice. This is a great game to have in your bag for if you've got that person. Not that I know anybody that's consistently late to game days. I would never out anybody for that personally, of course. Ha ha ha. But if you have that person that is always late, or you've got a couple people that you're waiting for, this is a really solid choice to add to your board game bag. Like I said, and 3 to 7 players is a nice player count. There aren't a lot of really good, fast games that aren't social deduction. And this has a hint of social deduction. Has a hint of deduction, not social deduction, because of the lifesaver tokens, so you don't exactly know which 3 rats, although it's usually pretty easy to figure out by about halfway through the game. But there is a little bit of trying to figure out who's rooting for which rat. But again, what I was saying is something that plays 3 to 7 and doesn't take up a lot of time and isn't social deduction is a nice niche that I don't think there are a ton of games that do. So I really dig it. So that's Abandoned Ship from AEG, Reiner Knizia's 2008 release, calling it a buy it / trade for it. Thank you, live viewers, for watching. Thank you, afterwards viewers, for checking it out. Leave your opinions on the live stream in the comments below. All the links for all the Cubisty bits are here. Just real quick, this does not replace the Monday show at all. The theory is that I'm going to try and do more of these live streams more regularly. And I'm going to even be doing a couple unscripted things with other people. Quick teaser here. You're going to want to subscribe to the YouTube channel and turn your notifications on because I'm going to be doing some more unscripted stuff as the weeks go by. I really haven't been able to focus a ton of time on the Cubist, but my schedule has shifted pretty significantly over the last few months. And so I'm really looking forward to diving further into YouTube and doing more content, especially live stream stuff, because I really love being able to talk to you guys. So anyway, thanks everybody. We will see you tomorrow night for the main show. Everybody have a great night. Stay safe. The weather sucks. Ugh.